request Dr. Prashant Pandey to take on the proceedings of the session.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arijit. Thank you very much to Dr. Arijit and the whole team, like Purnima, who has organized in such a nice way the Zoom poll. And thanks to Rakesh, thanks to Abhinav. Now, since this opportunity has been given to me to introduce our guest also, we have we have a very good guest with us, who is a very known blood donor. If you see in the arena of blood banking, and the name is Mr. Harish Patel. Harish ji, I would like to welcome you, and I really feel privileged in introducing you to this forum. And in fact, not the first time. I also know with my good friends of Gujarat, like Dr. Gajjar and Dr. Nidhi Bhatnagar. And for one reason, I was knowing you for a very long time actually, and that you organize blood donation camps in your house actually. And this you are doing for last 30 years, more than 30 years actually. And in a conference in 2011, it was in Hyderabad, where we were discussing among the junior residents that this kind of activity also happens in India for promotion of voluntary blood donation. So really, I would like to welcome you in this forum, and definitely the audience, in fact, me and everyone will learn a lot from your experience. And this opportunity will be given to you during the question answer and during the Zoom polling discussion. And your expertise will be used to let the people know how the voluntary blood donation can be promoted in India. You know, the decentralized blood bank in India is a big challenge for promotion of voluntary blood donation. But still, how you are doing is definitely a good and challenging work for us, and it will be interesting for us to know how you manage it. And for the audience, I would just like to know that he has donated more than 225 times the whole blood and platelet donation, majority or platelet donation. You must be knowing the dengue cases and the cancer patients, they fight for getting the blood donor for the platelets. So definitely he has done a great job. And he has organized more than 1650 camps in Ahmedabad and nearby area. So he has in his credit more than 68,000 blood donations, voluntary blood donations. So it's a great time for us to learn that how he did this. And along with that, he is also associated in the management of Sri Satya Sai Hospital, Ahmedabad and Rajkot, where heart surgeries are done free of cost to the patients. And he used to provide blood to those patients. He just act like basically a boon for that particular those two hospitals where he helped in getting the blood donors. So in short, I would like to say that he is the brand ambassador actually for the forum like the voluntary blood donations. So again, I would like to welcome you again and again, Mr. Harish, for being with us in this forum. And now we will move forward to the topic. The topic which we have chosen today for the discussion is about the counseling of the blood donor. So when you go for the counseling of the blood donor, it just do not happen just for a session of the blood donation. But this is a good opportunity has been given by the donor to let you know how the donor can be retained for lifelong. Because once the donor is motivated and is happy with the counseling process, he is happy with the blood bank staff, usually you must have seen that they come repeatedly, one after the other, after every 3 months or 6 months. So they used to come. So this is a good opportunity has been given by the donor. So we need to utilize this opportunity as much as possible. So what is the ultimate aim of having the counseling or having the repeat voluntary donors? What I believe, what I have learned that it increases the number of the repeat voluntary donors. And once we increase the repeat of voluntary blood donation, then what happens? There is a drastic decrease in the transmitted infections because literature says the repeat voluntary donors, they have lesser risk of TTI than the donor who is coming as a replacement or first time donor. Now we have the opportunity that we can create a pool of the rare blood donors like the Bombay phenotype, or we can designate a donor for a particular patient having multiple allo antibody or autoimmune hemolytic anemia cases having some hidden rare allo antibodies. So in that case, the donor has given you a lot of opportunity to understand. And blood bank actually is a place where out of every 1,000 you can get at least one donor who will ask you that how can I become a solid organ donor, a voluntary? How can I become a stem cell donor for the cancer patients? So counseling actually a skill, is an art. If you know, then you can convert the donor to become a stem cell donor. To convert a donor to become a organ donor, you must be knowing the condition, what the organ transplant and where the organ transplant is going in India. So it is a very good opportunity has been given to you. Now, I would like to introduce Dr. Divya, and she will let you know what exactly the counseling and how it should be done, how this art should be done. In brief, Dr. Divya has done DNB in transfusion medicine, or you can say IHBT from Medanta, Gurgaon. And after that, she is working as attending consultant in the Department of Transfusion Medicine and Transplant Immunology at JP Hospital, Noida. She has done extremely good job in academics. Until now, she has published more than 25 papers in various international and national journals. She has got various awards and accolades. And if you see in 2020, she got the Junior Investigator Award in the American Society for Apheresis Conference 2020. And 2017, she got the Travel Fellowship Award by the ISTM, which was organized in Lucknow. So with these words, I would like to introduce Dr. Divya to start the session. Dr. Divya, now the dais to you, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's start with the presentation. Donor counseling. Donor counseling is every donor's right, and my presentation has been divided under the following heads: background, roles and responsibilities of a counselor, counseling skills, stages of counseling, which include pre-donation information, pre-donation counseling, counseling during donation and post-donation counseling. Then elements of blood donor counseling and how to retain and motivate a donor. So what is counseling? Counseling is also known as the talking cure, and Philip Bernard correctly said that counseling means by which it is the means by which one person helps another to clarify his or her life situation and to decide the further lines of action. But in context of transfusion services, WHO defines blood donor counseling as a confidential dialogue between a blood donor and a trained counselor about the issues related to the donor's health and the donation process. And the counselor's job is to reassure and provide suitable information after listening to the concerns of the counselee. In our case, the counselee is the donor. So what are the roles and responsibilities of a counselor in a blood bank? First is donor education. Donor education regarding the whole blood donation process, transfusion transmitted infection reactivity and referral and preventive health education. Next is correct donor identification, reporting and record keeping, and motivation and monitoring. The counselor should continuously try and improve their counseling skills. Coming to what are counseling skills? So all kinds of talking are not counseling skills. Special ways of talking which help the counselees are known as counseling skills, and these are deliberate. Means that there is use of particular statement and sentences with the planned aim of a certain effect on the blood donor. When we look at counseling skills, they are basically divided into three categories. First is positive listening, second, information gathering, and third, supportive techniques. We shall now discuss all of these one by one. So the first is positive listening. A counselor must listen carefully to avoid missing key facts to show counselees that they are listening. They should pay attention and use statements and gestures to reflect that they are listening. This can be done by the use of minimal encouragers. Minimal encouragers are words or phrases such as okay, tell me some more, or head nods. This is a way to continue the conversation without actually interrupting the speaker. This keeps the conversation ticking and shows that the listener is interested in the conversation. For example, if the donor says, "My father died of a heart attack," the counselor says, and then he continues, "He was 73 years old." So she says, "Yes." And then he says, "He had been suffering from diabetes from some years." So here you can see the counselor actually kept on the conversation ticking without actually interrupting the flow of conversation. Next is the use of an open body posture. Closed body postures with closed arms indicate that the listener is either not interested or uncomfortable or bored. So we use this knowledge to mold our bodies accordingly, and the figure on the right shows an open body posture. Next is repeating and paraphrasing. The counselor repeats some of the last words of the sentences used by the counselee to encourage the donor to speak or elaborate. This is usually used when there is a pause in the conversation. For example, if the donor says, "My father was 73 years old, he died of a heart attack." There is a pause in the conversation, so the counselor says, "A heart attack." And then he continues, "Yes, he died of a heart attack. It was very sudden. He never had any real problems before that other than diabetes." Paraphrasing is a form similar to repeating, but here instead of repeating the actual words used by the donor, the counselor repeats the facts in their own words. This is to highlight relevant points before moving on to a next topic and to check their own understanding. A word of caution: the counselor does not have to assume anything on their own here. So, taking the previous example only, if the counselor uses paraphrasing as a counseling skill, they would say, "So far, you have shared that your father died suddenly of a heart attack at the age of 73. Before that, his only problem was diabetes." The next counseling skill is reflection. Reflection is basically throwing back at the counselee what they said or feelings that they had showed. This can be reflection of content, where there is use of counselee's words as much as possible, or reflection of feelings, where there are observations about the emotional state of the counselee. Here, we have to keep in mind that the counselor does not have to assume that their own personal reaction would be the emotional response of the donor. For example, if the donor says, "My father was 73 years old, he died of a heart attack, it was very sudden, he never had any real problems before that other than diabetes. He was 48 when he discovered he had diabetes, and my current age is 48." So the counselor senses something and then she says, "So you are 48 years old. At 48, your father found out he had diabetes. It seems like you might be concerned about diabetes yourself. Is this right?" So the counselor has used reflection of content here. Another example: if the donor says, "How big a needle will you use?" The counselor senses something and then she says, "From your question, I get the feeling you might be scared. Would this be a correct guess?" So here the counselor is actually using reflection of feelings. Coming to the second counseling skill, that is information gathering. A counselor initiates interaction with the donor basically to know about the medical history and personal habits of the donor. The counselor uses open-ended and closed-ended questions judiciously here. So what are closed questions? Those questions which produce a simple yes or no answer and do not permit elaboration are closed questions. These are basically used to get direct answers to specific questions. For example, if the counselor is asking, is this the first time you have donated blood? The donor either replies yes or no. This is used to get a direct answer. In contrast, open-ended questions generate answers with more details. So a yes or no answer in this situation would not be appropriate. For example, if the counselor asks the donor, what kinds of illnesses have you suffered from? The donor would not reply yes or no here. They would give a detailed answer. For example, nothing major, coughs, colds. Once I had dengue fever. The questions used in information gathering should be well planned and appropriate. We do not have to use any leading questions. Why? Because leading questions make it difficult for the person answering the question to reply freely without actually contradicting the person asking the question. So, for example, if the counselor wants to ask whether the donor is sexually active or not, and if they ask in this manner that you're not sexually active, are you? So even if the donor wants to reply, yes, I'm sexually active, they would still reply no to this question. The third counseling skill is use of supportive techniques where we try to deliberately provide an appropriate supportive response to the counselee's specific concern. The first technique is use of normalization. Some situations produce identical reactions in a number of people. For example, when we talk of blood donation, before donation, people are usually concerned about the pain that they might experience during donation. Appropriate counseling response for this would be to acknowledge this by saying that many people feel the same way and then quickly moving on to how to manage it. So one would acknowledge the concern, reassure the donor, and then instill confidence in the blood bank. So the counselor would use terms like, it is normal to feel, or it is common for people to feel, or most people normally feel like you do. So, for example, if the donor says, actually, though I have come forward to give blood, I am slightly worried. The counselor should reply in the following manner. It is common for people to feel a bit worried when they face the prospect of a needle. Let me tell you how we manage this process so you might feel a little less anxious. However, if the counselor uses the following, such as, oh, everybody feels a bit worried when they face the prospect of a needle, you should not worry so much about a little pinprick. This would be the wrong way. Here we have to keep in mind that normalization as a skill should be used only when the reaction is normal. And normalization is used for feelings and not actions. Next is identifying the strengths and resources. So here we help the counselee remember the strengths and resources that they have used in the past, including people who have given emotional support in the past, prayer and spirituality, positive coping mechanisms, and ability to reason and use logic. Coming to stages of blood donor counseling. There are 4 stages of blood donor counseling: pre-donation information, pre-donation counseling, counseling during donation, and post-donation counseling. When we come to pre-donation information, the basic aim is to inform and educate donors about the process of blood donation. General information, which is similar for all donors, is given to the donors in a very simple and clear format. This can be given verbally or in the form of printed or graphic, audiovisual, or online materials. This can be provided individually or in a group. Here, the donor is given the opportunity for self-deferral, and pre-donation information is provided to donors at the same time as distribution of the donor questionnaire. What are the objectives of pre-donation information? So there are primarily three main objectives. First, to increase donor awareness of blood bank's responsibilities, steps in the blood donation process and rationale of each step, the importance of safe donated blood for recipients, the purpose of blood screening for transfusion transmitted infections, and limitation of these tests, including the window period. The second objective is to increase the donors' trust in blood bank and encourage them to respond honestly to the blood donor selection criteria and inform the blood bank of any recent behaviors that might predispose them to a risk of transfusion transmitted infections. The third is to encourage individuals to self-defer if they have engaged in any behavior that puts them at a risk of transfusion transmitted infection, or they are seeking to know their infection status by the use of blood donation. It is very important that pre-donation information be given in a very simple language, and we should avoid medical terms as much as possible and the use of slang as well. Chunking should be used here. What is chunking? Chunking is when the counselor discusses one key idea completely before moving on to the next. So if the counselor has three topics to discuss, A, B, and C, they would complete A completely, then move on to B, and then move on to C. They would not mix facts from B after completing C. Next is repeating and summarizing. The counselor should summarize their own explanation to ensure that the donor has completely understood what they are trying to convey. Next is pre-donation counseling. Pre-donation counseling is basically done to check the donor's understanding, to clarify any misunderstanding about donor selection, blood donation, and screening that they might have. The counselor then reviews the donor's answers on the donor questionnaire. They explain to the donor that it is absolutely normal to self-defer. They then obtain the donor's informed consent. And here it is very important that the counselor uses a non-judgmental or neutral tone of voice when asking questions. The objectives of pre-donation counseling include to ensure that the donor understands the donor questionnaire and responds accurately, to ensure that the donor understands that his or her blood will be tested, to ensure that the donor is in a position to give informed consent, and to ensure that the donor is willing to be informed of the test results. Now, what is the difference between pre-donation information and pre-donation counseling? When we talk of information, information focuses only on delivery of a common set of messages that can be delivered either on a one-to-one basis or can be given to a group. But when we talk of counseling, counseling focuses on the donor and it must be done on a one-to-one basis only. So when a counselor faces direct personal questions from a donor, they should always direct those personal issues towards the counseling session when a one-to-one discussion can be done. Coming to the third stage, that is counseling during donation. Now, donors' experience during this time will actually shape their overall experience and willingness to donate blood in future. Hence, it is the responsibility not only of the counselor, but the entire blood bank staff to maintain a warm and polite environment. They should respond courteously to any questions that are being asked by the donor, and they should manage any sort of adverse donor reaction professionally. All the blood bank staff should remain alert to the donor's words and bodily cues to pick up any sort of discomfort. During donation, when the phlebotomy has to be started, the blood bank staff should introduce themselves. They should ask about the previous history. They should gently reassure the donor talk about venipuncture, talk about skin disinfection, give them information about what volume would be collected, what would be the time that would be taken for that collection, and give them the opportunity for confidential unit exclusion, CUE. Now, what is confidential unit exclusion? Usually, donors under peer pressure are basically persuaded or coerced to donate. However, if the donor feels that his blood is not safe for transfusion, what can they do? With the help of confidential unit exclusion, we give them the opportunity to inform immediately after donation or subsequently if they consider that their blood may not be suitable for transfusion to a recipient. So it is important that the blood bank staff should give donors the information to enable them to contact the blood bank and to communicate that their blood should not be used for transfusion. So what are the objectives when we counsel during donation? First, to ensure that the donors feel comfortable during blood donation, including venipuncture. Second is to reduce their anxiety, which would minimize the risk of any adverse donor reaction. Third is to give post-donation advice, including care of the venipuncture site. Fourth is to secure the donor's cooperation in CUE and to foster donor trust and confidence for retention. Coming to the fourth stage of counseling, that is the post-donation counseling. This is a need-based counseling. Immediately after donation, the donors are given self-care instructions and information about adverse after effects. They are given a brief message on how to keep a healthy lifestyle, and they are encouraged for regular blood donation, and they are thanked for contribution. And at a later stage, they are counseled about their serology reports and the transfusion transmitted infection results. The objectives of post-donation counseling are to explain the test results, the need for confirmation of the results, and the health implication for the donor and the donated blood. To encourage donors to provide all the relevant information, to clarify their doubts or concerns, to alleviate their anxiety, to provide information on precautions for preventing the transmission of infections, to provide information and refer donors for further investigation if necessary, and to reinforce the importance of healthy lifestyles for donors. When we talk of elements of effective blood donors counseling, we should keep in mind that all blood donors should receive counseling, and good counseling can enhance the image of a blood transfusion service. The donor's perception of how he was treated by the staff are actually the strongest predictors for retention of the donor. So there are essential features in counseling activities that should be kept in mind. For example, counseling should be easily accessible to donors. It should be performed in a suitable and conducive environment. It should focus on matters that are of concern to the donor. They should deliver a consistent and accurate message. Counseling should be objective and empathetic, and it should not be affected by the counselor's subjective feelings about the donor. The donors should know, they should be ensured that confidentiality would be maintained at all times, and it is important to give adequate time to each donor so that a trust can be developed. Next is, what are the essential elements of counseling in different situations? So, for example, we have a first-time blood donor or a young blood donor. The most important element of counseling here would be reassurance to allay his anxiety and apprehension, and encouragement to return for future donations. Second situation is donor deferred permanently or temporarily. So in this case, during counseling, it is important to explain the reason for deferral, clarify the nature of deferral, whether it is temporary or permanent, and explain the defined deferral period if it's temporary, reassured to allay their anxiety, encourage the donors to come back again after the defined deferral period, and give them information on how to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Next situation is donor with risk for transfusion transmitted infection or a donor who requests confidential unit exclusion. Here, one should explain the reason for deferral and give information on the specific risk for transfusion transmitted infection. If the donor has specific risk, then we should refer them for treatment, care, and support and provide the relevant information. And if the donor is seeking to ascertain his infection status by donating blood, then we should provide information on voluntary counseling and testing services. And we should reassure the donor. Next situation is when the donor has experienced an adverse reaction previously. Here, we should inform and advise the donor with preventive steps to reduce the risk of adverse reactions, such as adequate fluid intake before donation, assurance of care that the blood bank is the activities of the blood bank are directed towards donor well-being. If the donor has experienced bruising or hematoma in the past, then we should explain to him as to why and how the bruising had occurred and the actions that the donor can take to reduce the bruising and pain. And then the counselor can discuss possible preventive measures against bruising during future donations. Next situation is when the donor is showing repeated reactive TTI results on screening. However, the confirmatory test is negative. Here, the counselor should explain the repeated reactive test results and the need for confirmatory testing. Information about the donor deferral period should be given to the donor. They should be reassured so that their apprehension can be subsided, and they should encourage the donor to return for future donations as the confirmatory test results are non-reactive. The next situation is when the donor has indeterminate TTI results with unclear confirmatory results, where infection cannot be ruled out. Here, it is the responsibility of the counselor to explain what is the indeterminate test result and the need for confirmatory testing. They should inform the fate of the blood donation, and they should provide relevant information about the risk of transfusion transmitted infections and also explain the need for temporarily deferring the donor. Next is a donor who has been found to have confirmed positive markers for TTI. So here it is the responsibility of the counselor to explain the positive TTI results, inform them about the health implications, and they should also tell them about the fate of the blood donation, that is the unit would be discarded, and the suitability of the donor for future blood donations. The donor should be given relevant information about the TTI. They should be reassured. They should be given on how to prevent further transmission, and then they should be referred for further investigation, management, treatment, and care if necessary. The next situation is if the donor has unusual red cell serology or a rare blood group. Here it is important that information should be given clearly to the donor and the nature of the results and the importance be explained to the donor. And they should be advised to carry this information personally at all times should a need arise for blood transfusion. They should be encouraged to return for future donations, and if the donor has a rare blood group, then they should be encouraged to get themselves enrolled in the rare donor panel. So So it is the responsibility of the blood bank to emphasize on the positive aspects of blood donation. All would-be donors should know about the safety standards that you practice in your blood donation setup, and they should be ensured that confidentiality is maintained. The blood bank can use social motivation techniques and stories to motivate the donors. They should establish and maintain a professional and respectful atmosphere. If the donors are being temporarily deferred, then one should politely defer them and encourage them to return back at a later date. For all blood banks, donor motivation and retention is a continuous process. We must seek to constantly increase number of donors and retain those who are already enrolled. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Divya. Dr. Divya, actually you presented the whole topic. It's really a big topic, but the way you presented is really very informative to all the audience, what I feel. And this is one of the most, I think this is the easiest and the most difficult topic for the blood bank officers actually, particularly in circumstances, what you said about the specialized circumstances, like when the donor is found to be HIV, hepatitis B or hepatitis C positive. So it's really an art, skill, and the process should be deliberate and it should be done by a trained person. So with these words, I would like to thank you again for the great presentation. Now, Dr. Arijit. Dr. Arijit,
Yeah.
Can we start the discussion of the Zoom polling results?
Yes, yes. Can we request Purnima to please share the audience poll?
Correct.
Can you make it full screen?
So I think Purnima should coordinate with Dr. Divya, and the results are with us actually. So Dr. Divya?
Yes, sir.
Can we discuss one by one the Zoom results?
Yes, sir.
Purnima?
Can you please move to the first question, Purnima?
Yeah.
The
Yes.
first question was, which of the following is a stage of counseling? Pre-donation information, pre-donation counseling, post-donation counseling, all of the above. So 80% said all of the above, which is the correct answer. There are 4 stages of counseling, namely pre-donation information, pre-donation counseling, counseling during donation, and post-donation counseling.
Correct. So 80% people answered correct. So remaining 20%, 10% said that it's just a pre-donation counseling, which is not correct. So it has to be right from the information to the post-donation counseling. Now go to the second question, Dr. Divya. Please move forward.
The second question was, counseling skills include all except normalization, paraphrasing, leading questions, and reflection. So 57% answered leading questions, which is the correct answer. We do use normalization, paraphrasing, and reflection. Leading questions are avoided so that the donor can answer freely.
Okay, great. So 57% people gave the correct answer like leading questions. So now the next one about the counseling skill.
Third question was, counseling skills are A, unpredictable, B, deliberate, C, unempathetic, D, inattentive. So the correct answer is B, that is deliberate, and 58% answered deliberate. Counseling skills are intended to produce a specific response. They are not unpredictable, they are well planned. They are not unempathetic, they are empathetic. One should feel the donor's concerns, and it is very important for the counselor to be attentive. They should have positive listening skills.
Good. The next question is about the question. It should be open or closed.
So questions asked to the donor can be open-ended, closed, or both. 74% answered both, which is the correct answer. So questions where we have to ask about the medical history, usually we tend to use closed questions. But when we have to get details or an elaborate answer, then we use open-ended questions.
Correct. You want to add anything, Dr. Arijit?
No, I think perfect, because as per the talk also, if you want to direct one word answer either in a yes or a no or a particular data point, then that can be a closed question. And if we want to probe further, then that can be open-ended. I think, and we have to use both of them. We have to calibrate and use both of them.
Mr. Harish, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm hearing.
Yeah. Welcome you, sir. Welcome you here on the board. Sir, actually, about just the, we would just like to know, the audience actually must be liking to know about the skill of the counseling actually. Can you give an idea about your experience in donor counseling?
First of all counselor have to put one thing in his mind, that blood donor, if there is a no blood donor, there is a no job for that.
Correct. Absolutely.
Right. So there is a every blood donor is a precious for his own job. So be prepared for counseling with all silly questions, all good questions, all type of motivational questions.
Correct.
Right.
So
correct. That is the first mindset of all, I think all counselor have that type of mindset. The blood donor is there, then we are here.
Correct. That is our job actually. Frankly speaking,
right,
that is our job. The
right,
day
sir.
should be start with the donor, and the ending of the day should happen with the donor.
Right, sir.
The wellness of donor is the wellness of us actually.
Yes, sir.
Correct. Absolutely right. Right,
sir.
Harishji.
Right.
Now, Dr. Divya, the next question is about the elements of counseling.
The next question is, elements of counseling include all except positive donor identification, care and referral, non-conducive environment, and documentation. So 85% answered non-conducive environment, and that is the correct answer. One should provide a very warm, favorable environment to the donors and not a non-conducive environment.
Great. So good. A lot of people, 85% people have given the correct answer. Great. The next one.
Next is, counseling should be performed in A, an open space, B, closed space with no audio privacy, third, a closed space with audio privacy, and anywhere. So the correct answer is C, that is a closed space with audio privacy, and 78% answered this. It is very important that when a donor is being counseled, they should be provided audio and video privacy.
Okay, so 78% people have given the correct answer. So almost 80%. So good. So the next one, now coming to the next one.
Next question is, what should be the body posture for counseling? 89% said open, and that is the correct answer. Closed posture with closed arms actually is the wrong way of counseling, which gives the impression to the donor that you are not interested in listening at all.
Yes, so very nice. 89% people have given the correct answer. Very nice. So the next we'll move on to next question.
100%. Counseling should include...
Great. Big clap for them.
Donor motivation for regular blood donation, slang, no reassurance, no information about transfusion transmitted infection. So As we can see, the correct answer is donor motivation for regular blood donation. One should not use slang because the donor wouldn't understand what you're trying to convey. One should always reassure the donor and to reduce the anxiety and apprehension that he might have. And it is very important to give information about transfusion transmitted infections to all donors.
Great, great. 21% people have given the correct answer. Last two questions, I think. Last question, I think, huh?
Next question is, donor retention can be achieved by A, appropriate counseling, B, warm and friendly environment, C, encouragement, D, all of the above. 91% said all of the above, which is the correct answer.
Great, great, great. So we are coming to the last but not the least.
What should be included in the elements of counseling for a donor with confirmed positive markers for TTI? A, explanation of positive results. B, information about discarding of unit. C, information on how to prevent further transmission. And D, all of the above. So 97% D, all of the above, which is the correct answer. The donor should be explained about the results. They should, the counselor must be empathetic. They should inform them. They should actually reassure them, and then they should refer them and provide information on how to prevent further transmission.
Very good, very good. So if you see the Zoom polling, majority of people have given answer, more 80%, more than 80% audience have given the correct answer, except 2-3 questions. If I see, then the one was about the counseling skill, which includes all except like the leading question. Just 28 people out, means 57% answered correct. So definitely it's a skill part. And one more question was about the process, which should be deliberate actually, where the 58% people have answered. Otherwise, in most of the questions, we have around 70 to 100% answers. So really great. It's really great. So now the Zoom polling results are, anything else, Dr. Arijit, in this Zoom polling? Would you like to add something?
No, I think on some of, as you said, some of the questions where people have, all the audience participants have responded unanimously on the right answer, but on some of the questions the house was divided. I like the one that you see on the screen.
Correct. About the process and about the skill.
Right.
So this is the core subject actually. So this is really a great response from the audience. But here I would like to one question from Mr. Harish about, sir, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just my curiosity to know, okay, how you become a repeat voluntary donor. Since you have given 225 times.
Yeah.
So what actually incited in you to become a repeat voluntary donor?
So first of all, when blood requirement is arrived, I change my priority.
Okay.
If today is meeting going on and I've required blood donation, blood anywhere, so I think I am going there.
Okay, so priority is the priority is the blood donation.
Blood donation.
Correct. Correct.
That is my first priority. Right. Second, I always like surety to the all mark donors. If you are giving the blood, whenever and wherever and any place you required, I am be there. My phone is 24 hours, like ready to call and deliver the blood anywhere in India, anywhere.
Very nice, very nice. So definitely you might have sacrificed many
some type of confidence to donate blood. Second thing, correct. I go to organize small camp in the school like 11, 12th standard schools. Oh. When teachers are donating and whole day teachers are doing like his work, sports teachers are in ground. So many phobias in small students are like vanished on that place.
Correct,
So,
correct.
so they are like my long-term future donor.
Correct, correct. This is the alley of anxiety, actually, what Dr. Divya said.
Right.
When the donor is for first time, then they are apprehensive, they are in anxiety, actually, and the most important is the pain of needle, actually.
Right.
So
And
if you, correct.
yeah.
Yeah, please carry on, sir.
Yeah. And every 3 months, I repeatedly contact with so many. It's nowadays there is a WhatsApp, phone. When I started my camp in 1985 in February.
Correct, correct.
That time there is a so less communication. So I go to door to contact him every 3 months. Everybody wants to donate, but we have to push little bit.
We have to push, and we have excuse for everything. Not for not donating, we have a lot of excuses. Then there is no excuse for donation, actually, frankly
Yes,
speaking.
sir. Yes.
Great job. Actually, you are doing a great job, sir. Actually, I met a similar people in Bangalore also. I think you might be knowing that guy, Mr. Blood Kumar.
Yeah.
There is one guy who is known with the name of Blood Kumar in Karnataka, actually, in Bangalore. So
Right.
he was the PR officer in our BGS Global Hospital, Bangalore. So he was a fantastic guy. After every 14, 15 days, he will come for platelet donation. So really, it's a great opportunity, actually great learning for the audience, actually being a blood bank officer. We just not here to collect blood, but sometimes when it is required, we have to arrange from our end also. We have to be the voluntary donors, actually.
Right.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Now, yeah, thank you very much, sir. Now, I think we should move forward for the question answer session. Yeah, Dr. Ajit?
Yeah, absolutely. We already have something on the Q&A tab.
Correct. I am seeing the first question is about the availability of this presentation to the audience. Sorry. Because one question has been asked, if someone is busy in their duties because the COVID plasma time is here, COVID. So can we share the slides or presentation to the audience? And what is the way to share with them? Purnima. Yeah, Dr. Ajit, please.
Yeah, I think we can share. We all have the email addresses because we provided with the registration link and we have captured the email addresses. So in the same email addresses, we can revert back, circle back to all the participants with a copy of the presentation.
Correct. Dr. Divya, can you give your consent for sharing your presentation to the audience?
Yes, sir. I'm totally up for it.
Okay, great. So I think you, Dr. Ajit, you can convert this presentation in PDF and share with the audience who is interested in having this presentation.
Sure.
Yeah, please. Thank you, Dr. Ajit. Now the next question, Dr. Divya, one question is about the confidential unit exclusion. If a donor said consent for the CUE, then can we go for the TTI testing or not? Mr. Puneet Sachdeva is asking this question.
Every unit should be tested, irrespective of the fact if the donor is even sharing some knowledge that he might be at high risk of a TTI. Even then, we should test the unit and inform him of the same if the results come out to be reactive or non-reactive.
Correct. Provided he is giving consent to share the result.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. I think, Puneet, you must be happy with the answer, because see, any unit you have designated to the donor, you have collected the unit from the donor, it has to go for the testing. We have not to skip the testing. The whole process goes as usual for the other, like the other donors, like the other blood unit. And the similar question, I think Shefali is asking one question: can doctor or medical officer do the counseling, or a trained counselor is required to be recruited? Dr. Divya, please.
Ideally, a trained counselor should be present, because a doctor wouldn't be able to counsel all the donors. We cannot, being a medical officer, look after pre-donation information, pre-donation counseling, then counseling during donation, post-donation counseling. Everything cannot be managed by the medical officer. Ideally, one should have a trained counselor, but in the absence of the counselor, a medical officer who knows counseling skills well can actually counsel the donor.
Correct, correct. So, Shefali, one thing, the pre-donation counseling should ideally be done with a trained person, but ultimately the doctor has to see the patient for the final, because ultimately the signature of doctor goes, so he has to see the donor, he has to give his comments. So pre-donation counseling sometimes may be done by a trained nurse or a doctor or a medical officer. But when it comes to the TTI testing, it should be done by a counselor. It should be mandatorily should be done by a counselor, trained counselor, who is having experience in HIV donor or HIV patient counseling. So we need to have that in blood bank. So the Puneet is again asking one more question. I will just see. I just got a call. Again, okay. So Puneet is asking, if a donor still feels anxious about the counseling, should the donation be done or not? Even after after giving the information and doing the counseling, but still he is anxious in not giving the blood. Should we take the donation from the donor?
If a donor is given adequate information, he is given time for self-deferral, and he is actually provided adequate time and positive identification, and he develops the trust, then he shouldn't feel anxious during the donation. Uh, it is the responsibility of the people that are in the performing the counseling during donation to allay the anxiety in that and the apprehension that is associated, and it is absolutely the donor's choice to donate or not.
Correct. Ultimately, it is the choice of the donor who wants to give or not. But if the counseling is done in a comfortable environment, usually it doesn't happen that the donor says no, he will not give. It happens most of the time. It happens the donor will get ready for the blood donation, and that kind of feeling is very important, because the most important factor for anxiety is the pain of needle action, the 16 gauge needle we use. But I have not come across, I think in 15, 18 years of my career, once or twice it has happened, but most of the time, donor, they get agree for blood donation. So deferral period for tattooing, according to new guidelines, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. What is the new guideline for the deferral period for tattooing?
A deferral period for tattooing or ear piercing, which predisposes the donor to hepatitis or TTI, is 12 months. That is 1 year.
Correct. That is 1 year. Still, it is 1 year. So now we are moving to the next question. How would you counsel a donor who wishes to be informed of her TTI results by email? Puneet is asking this question. How would you counsel a donor who wishes to be informed of her TTI results by email?
As per NACO, whenever we have to inform a donor about their results, it is important that we tell them that we need to perform additional testing, and therefore we need them to come to the blood bank before disclosing their positive results. However, if they want their negative results, then negative results can be shared with them.
Correct. Negative results can be shared with the donor, but positive result, I think we can, because email access, usually it is considered that it's private, but most of the time now if you see in your mobile, it is open for all. Any of the family member can see. So I think it should not be sent through. I think that practice we don't have, and many of the blood banks don't have. But there is nothing like in the guidelines that it can be sent on mail. There is a process of NACO, and I think we should follow that process only. We can deny if he or she is asking on email. And the next question is, if the donor is seropositive, sero means serology positive, we have to inform him as per latest guidelines. Is NAT necessary? Dr. Divya.
Sir, I did not get the question.
again, if donor is seropositive, presently what is the protocol is we have to inform him as per the latest guidelines.
Yes, sir.
But what about the result of NAT? Because you are doing the additional test NAT. So do we need to inform them the NAT result also? Because if serology positive, NAT negative, then what to do?
We should inform. NAT is not mandatory as per the national guidelines, but if a donor comes out to be reactive in NAT, we should inform the donor about the same.
Correct. So present guidelines is all about the seropositivity, not the NAT testing. You are absolutely right. We need to include the guy. It has been discussed in various seminars and CMEs and the national conferences that what to do with the NAT. But still there is no protocol for NAT testing reporting. This is definitely a challenge for us. On one hand, we are increasing the safety, but since there is no protocol, we have to follow the guidelines, what exactly the guideline is. So we have to stick on seropositive results. So the next question is, do we discard the unit by Asha Joshi? Do we discard the unit if donor gave a positive CUE and TTI comes negative?
Yes, sir. We would discard the
Correct.
unit even if the donor comes out to be negative in TTI testing, because there is always a chance of missing the infection during the window period.
Correct. So if he has said that his blood is not safe for transfusion, so even if TTI comes negative, we have to discard. Correct. So the next question by again, are guidelines for information to donor regarding testing for hepatitis B, C and HIV are same regarding ELISA and NAT testing? I think he is asking the same question about the NAT testing reporting.
Yes.
That the guidelines for information to donor regarding the testing for hepatitis B, C and HIV are same regarding ELISA and NAT testing? No, it is not. I think not. Correct. You start. You explain.
Because guidelines do not mention NAT testing.
Correct. It is all about the serology based or chemiluminescence based testing. So it is not about the NAT testing, because this is just the additional test what we are doing to enhance the safety of blood transfusion. So it is not in guidelines, but yes, it should be. Now the next question from Dr. Vikram is about the deferral period for whole blood donation after COVID-19 infection.
So this is 28 days?
COVID-19 infection, yes. Deferral period.
28 days?
It is 28 days. It is 28 days because it is the same guideline being used for 28 days after the negative test report. The day when the patient became negative. So if he wants to give, he or she can give after 28 days, because that is the same guideline being used for the plasma donation. Correct, Dr. Divya?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now the next question. We have 3-4, I think, more questions. If anyone gave history of safe needle for tattoo, can we take donation?
There is no guarantee that the person that was performing the tattooing used a safe needle. And the guidelines mention that tattooing, they do not mention whether with a safe needle or with an unsafe needle. Therefore, all donors who have been tattooed have to be deferred for 12 months.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Absolutely. Because there is no surety by words. We cannot go with the words because it's a licensed facility and you are doing the counseling. It is confidential. It is recorded. So we cannot go with the words. If you find that, yes, there is tattooing, then you have to go by law, not by the words. So now the next question. What is the deferral period after hepatitis B vaccination?
Depends upon what kind of vaccine you are giving. If it's a non-live vaccine or a toxoid, the deferral period is 14 days. If it's a live vaccine, the deferral period is 28 days. if you're using a serum, that is something like anti-tetanus serum or anti-gas gangrene serum, then the deferral is 28 days. And if the donor has been given any sort of immunoglobulin, then the deferral period is 1 year.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. There is one question by Puneet Sachdeva that, but NACO never mentions for physical presence of donor. He's just asking about the counseling and if he wants results by mail. So it is the continuation of the same question that NACO never mentioned for physical presence of donor. Can you just clarify this, because I think he is not happy with the answer. Mr.
NACO just says that confidentiality should be maintained. So at any point of time, the donor should not feel that there is breach of confidentiality. So there is nothing written as such that they have to come in person to collect the report or not. But if it's a reactive report, then definitely we have to telephonically inform them that they have to come to the blood bank. We do not disclose the results over a telephonic conversation. The disclosure of the positive report is done during post-donation counseling when the donor arrives at the blood bank.
Correct, correct. And definitely, first we have to call the donor, what the guidelines, what the NACO says. You call them twice. If they are not getting the call, then you can send a confidential letter to him. With that letter, he has to come to the blood bank, and then we will counsel him. So that is the post-donation counseling is done, and then we can send to the ICTC center. And that is the clear guidelines. I think there should not be much discussion about that. But nobody is asking for the physical presence right from the beginning. But once we send the letter, we call them, we send the letter. If he is not coming back, because most of the time donor doesn't come back, 80% of the cases, but in remaining 20% of the cases, we have to counsel, post-donation counseling has to be done. Now the next, I think Puneet has just given a suggestion that I would like to say, just treat the donor like a guest, make his experience of donation satisfactory, and the donor will definitely return. You are absolutely right what Mr. Hari is, and in a simple word, he says that our bread and butter is the donor. Happiness of the donor is our bread and butter. So exactly the same, he is definitely a guest, so we have to honor him like that. So when, I think this one is the last question. When donor sample comes positive in CLIA, chemiluminescence, and negative in rapid testing, shall we call the donor for counseling and referral, not the referred?
So NACO clearly mentions that you do not have to decide whether the donor is actually positive for a TTI or not. If one test is reactive, you have to simply counsel them about that the test is only a screening test and refer them for the confirmatory test. We do not have to decide whether the donor is actually positive for the TTI or not.
Correct, correct. Because Dr. Kamal is asking about two tests he is mentioning. He is mentioning for the CLIA and mentioning for the rapid testing. I think there is no rapid testing guidelines. Either we have to do the CLIA or we have to do the ELISA-based test. So when we are doing the CLIA is a serological test. So when there is a seropositivity, you have to inform the donor. You have to counsel the donor. Because we are not giving positive or negative report. We are giving reactive or non-reactive reports. So you have to counsel the donor. So I think these are all 15 questions what I think we have answered. I think there is no more questions. So Dr. Arijit, now the mic is to you for the vote of thanks.
While we were discussing the audio and video privacy, so she says it's very difficult, rather almost next to impossible, to have closed environment with audio privacy in outdoor blood donation drives.
Correct, correct.
And there's another question. Can we share the TTI screening results as negative for a donor as a document, which means printed results, and the donor can submit the TTI results somewhere else, like as part of health checkup. Is it a valid document? A frequent question which Asha Joshi, she says she faces while working in a blood bank.
See, Dr. Divya, you please.
Since we are only performing screening tests and not confirmatory tests, we should not give the donor a report of a positive or a negative in terms of a positive or negative result. We should always mention reactive or non-reactive. And when we are mentioning non-reactive, it means it is a screening result. So the donor can be given the report in print, but it should not mention that it is a positive or negative. It should clearly mention that it is a reactive or non-reactive result.
Correct. And it is up to the prerogative of the organization what they consider it. But most of the places, what I have seen, they consider it the blood bank's report, the TTI report, like the HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, syphilis, malaria. They consider it as a test report, but not as a health checkup report. For the wellness, yes, it is accepted. And the timing is very important, actually. Ashaji, actually, the timing is very important when an organization asks for the HIV testing. That timing is important, because if the blood donation has been done 2 years ago, they will not consider it real time actually. So the testing has to be done in real time when it was requested. So that's why sometimes they don't consider it as a valid test report. Anything, Dr. Rajit?
I think that's for today. I think.
Yeah, it was a nice session actually. Very nice. A lot of questions. Zoom polling was excellent actually. And again, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Harish ji. Thank you very much. Now the mic to you, Dr. Aziz, for the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Prashant, for running once again. I would say once again a wonderful session today. And I was just listening and just absorbing all the information that my takeaway was it's not only skill part, but it's an art. I mean, donor counseling and being empathetic, more having more listening skills, having more conversational skills to make the donor more comfortable and make him repeat donor. And it's a long process. We also heard Mr. Harish talk about how to remove the fear at the level of kids, at the level when they see their teachers donating, how to allay those fears right at the beginning. So I think overall, and the questions, the quality of those questions which were discussed, I think those were really practical, day-to-day questions, and I'm sure that this discussion would have helped a large part of the audience who were part of this session. And I thank you, Dr. Prashant, for running this entire session. Thank you, Dr. Divya, for articulating all the important points so very, I think, very lucidly. I thank Mr. Harish for taking out time and coming over and sharing his perspectives in the session. I thank my team, Purnima, Rakesh, Abhinav is there. So we all know how much work goes behind the scene. And we also would attempt at sending back the PDF copy of the lecture that was done today. And my request to all those who are still connected now is to please register when we send out the invitation for the next meeting, which happens on 8th of January, which is on organization of a blood donation camp. So we would sincerely request you to please join again with us for an interesting interactive session. So with that, I would thank all of the panel once again. I would thank Mr. Harish and my team here. And we wish you a very safe and happy rest of the day. Thank you very much.